All right, so now we're going to be going over Chapter 10. It's going to be portable fire extinguishers, where we're on the objectives. We're going to learn about our different classes of fires and the rating systems for extinguishers. We're going to describe the different agents, the operating systems, the basic steps of the fire extinguisher operation, and how to test the readiness of portable extinguishers. And then also part of the skills is to assess the operational readiness of a portable fire extinguisher. All right. They come in a lot of different sizes, shapes, extinguishing agent compounds, all that. From really tiny ones for the kitchen to ones that are huge that have to be on big wagon wheel looking truck assemblies. We need to know the type of extinguisher for the right type of fire. And here's a couple of examples of that. All right, the purpose of the fire extinguishers are try to extinguish the fire in the incipient stage. It's not a replacement for a fire suppression system, but it can help and be used as a backup. Just a little tidbit for the Class K fire extinguishers that are in cooking kitchens. Even though they have an ANSL system or something like that, a fire suppression system, they still have to be there to supplement that system. So, that's part of code there. They can be placed in many locations and immediate available for immediate use. There is a big section of the code, whether it be IFC or an FPA, that's going to cover fire extinguishers as far as size, mounting locations, how that they're supposed to be mounted, and all that. That's something that you're going to need to be familiar with, especially if you end up being a code official, because you're going to be asked those questions: how many do I need? What kind do I need? What size do I need? So on and so forth. And that's, you're going to get that question a lot. So if you go ahead and get very familiar with fire extinguishers, it helps you out. Excuse me. All right, the type of extinguishers kind of match the fires. Some agents, they're going to work better on different types of fires than others. And in some situations, it can be dangerous to apply the wrong extinguishing agent to the wrong type of fire. All right, so we know our Class A ordinary combustible fires. We can put it out with water. That's what we do every day, right? Our next one is going to be our Class B fires, and it's your flammable liquids. And you can use several different types of extinguishing agents. There's all kinds of different stuff out there, but this is part of the common set that you'll see is your A, B, and then also your C. It involves energized electrical equipment, and the extinguishing agent has like dry chemicals and carbon dioxide. Typically, you're going to find an ABC extinguisher that's going to encompass both or all of your A, B, and C class fires. All right, your Class D is going to be your combustible metals, and special extinguishing agents could be required on that. So, a lot of times you may see that in different processing operations, machine shops, stuff of that nature, where that they would have to have a fire extinguisher specific to Class D. All right, your Class K, like I was saying, they used in commercial kitchens, and that's for the cooking oils and deep fat fryers. It uses a wet chemical agent, and what I said earlier, a restaurant has a hood. They're required to have a Class K in the kitchen to supplement the hood system and the ANSL system. All right, we have the classifications for fire extinguishers are going to be based on their characteristics and abilities. Underwriter Laboratories That's going to be a third party independent testing lab that checks all your, pretty much everything that's out on the market, all your common goods. They're going to test it to make sure it does what it's supposed to do, and it does it safely. You'll see those underwriters at laboratory or the UL listing a lot, and that's going to be kind of your one of your common go-tos as far as checking equipment and things like that, or the applicability of uh, any type of features, lights, and so on and so forth in construction, plans reviews, things like that. Um, they do a lot of testing, identify the class of fires, um, where for what extinguisher and how to, if it's effective and safe. It uses letters and numbers. The letters indicate the class of fire, and the numbers used also for A and B. You're going to see more your A, B, C. That's kind of like the standardized system that you'll see as an inspector. Um, but you kind of see it as that, like a 4A has twice as much as a 2A. You'll also hear it in poundage, like a 10 pound, 5 pound, 20 pound, and so on and so forth. And they test these the different extinguishing agents and amounts and application rates and methods and all that in their fires and all their different laboratory testing, um, and their main goal is to find what is most effective in extinguishing the fire and to prevent it from rekindling. All right, your traditional lettering system. This is what you're going to see on the label. Used to designate the class of the fire and for what the extinguisher is intended for. Um, and you see the pictograph. Those are more common on your labeling, and that makes it to where not only does it have the classification of the fire in there, but it just kind of has a little picture as a reminder of what it is and what it's used for. All right. The fire extinguisher installation, that's one of the things that, like I had said, in the code sets where they can get pretty particular as to the location, how far up from the floor, um, the type of mounting that is permissible, and all that. Whenever you're looking at it, you want to, whenever you're recommending a or requiring a certain fire extinguisher, you're going to think into what type of fires will be likely to occur in that occupancy, how big the fire will get, and that's going to be according to your fire load that's in the buildings. But they must be readily visible and easily accessible. Has anybody ever had to go run in a building to go get a fire extinguisher? I guess not. I had one time, and even being a firefighter, you're looking around, they're hard to see sometimes if they're not out like they're supposed to be. And so that's one of the things we have to make sure that in the time of emergency that everything's just going wild, that people can quickly locate the fire extinguisher and deploy it to extinguish the fire and prevent its growth and for it can prevent it from spreading. All right, NFPA 10 has the different mounting recommendations. The top of the extinguisher weighing up to 40 pounds should not be any more than 5 foot above the floor. That's really high to mount any extinguisher. Um, the top of an extinguisher weighing more than 40 pounds should not be more than 3.5 feet above the floor. The bottom of the extinguisher should be at least 4 inches above the floor. You have a range, and this is coming from NFPA. IFC is very similar. They actually break it down in inches. But what I tell people is that whenever, and it's a lot of like your mom and pop shops and things like that, that when they mount them, it's after the fact. Maybe they open up a business in a building that they're renting, and it doesn't come with extinguishers and all, and they want to have them in there. But what I tell them easily is like, hey, whenever you're putting the mounting bracket and you're mounting it onto the wall, just make it where you can easily reach out and grab it. You know, they know the size, they know what it's there for. Um, you also may have some other considerations if there's in an area like a child care facility where there's the threat of a kid playing around it, pulling on it, dropping it down on themselves and hurting them. So you take all those different factors into consideration. All right, you're at it. The areas for the fire extinguisher replacement, they're divided into risk classification based on the amount and type of combustibles present. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. And we mentioned the fire load, how it plays in. All right, it shows here a little office, low hazard. Most of the materials are non-combustible, or arranged to where it's likely if there is a fire, it's going to stay small. Um, and it kind of listing in not much of a Class A combustible threat, maybe a little bit of Class B, and maybe some cans of air freshener or stuff like that, but not a whole lot. All right, your ordinary hazard, and that's more of Class A and Class B materials that can light than the light hazard. It could be warehouses that can contain Class 1 and 2 commodities. So, being aware, even though it contains that, what's your fire load as well. And then you have your high hazard, um, and that's manufacturing areas where they have kind of painting, open vats for dipping, coating, or storage materials or storage facilities for flammable liquids. And then they have an example here of a hood or a kitchen hood system over a deep fat fryer, and those are some of the higher risk areas because you have fuel and heat all there in the same area, and so that's where we require the additional extinguishing system included there in the hood. But we want to make sure that we're considering the type of fuel and the amount whenever we're determining the most appropriate type and placement. Um, some areas they're going to need extinguishers with more than just the one single rating. Most common times you're going to find the ABC extinguisher that's going to cover your three main hazards. And if it's a facility that has an area that's where there is a risk, maybe it's a machine shop where they're actually working with different types of flammable metals. It would be important to have a Class D extinguisher there. The the extinguishing agent is what's inside the fire extinguisher that extinguishes the fire, and they're developed to be more effective to extinguish the fires and the type of the materials that are involved and the size of the fire, and that's going to be based off of also your size of the extinguisher and what's required in an area. Most everybody that I know around in our area runs water extinguishers. They're really good. They can also be mixed with different contents. I know we were running them where we'd have some Dawn dishwashing detergent just to kind of act as a mild surfactant, kind of helps put fires out. It has a little bit of a foaming action, and it's really good for Class A fires. And but it's pressurized with normal air. It's something that you can break down at the station, put your reload with water and detergent, recharge with an air line, and put it back in service. The container needs to be checked every so often, pressure tested and all that. But You can also add different type of agents to it. There's a fuel buster that takes the flammability out of hydrocarbons. There's you can put AFFF in them, all kinds of stuff, multiple uses. But you're only going to see that really in fire department operations. Very hardly are you going to see a water extinguisher that's going to already come with an additive in your commercial environments. All right, dry chem is typically what you're going to find, and it's a dry, very finely ground particulate powder. It's so finely ground that it actually has a um, characteristic of a liquid that it can be poured out and it will spill and will go everywhere, just like a maybe a cup of water or something would. Um, but this has some advantages to where it can be used on Class B and C fires. It's not subject to freezing, and that's something to be mindful of. Is that we never had an issue with any of our extinguishers freezing on the trucks, but the dry chem is not going to, especially if it's put in an outside environment. Sometimes in our area we do get some freezing temperatures in the wintertime, so something to be mindful of um, as well whenever you're recommending extinguishers. And then you have the multi-purpose dry chem. Is what I was talking about, the A, B, and C um, type fire extinguishers, and it lists also ammonium phosphate as a dry chem, but it's rated for Class A. I believe that's part of the multi-purpose or the mixture that is reloaded in there. Carbon dioxide, you really don't see a whole lot of these anymore. It has to be kind of a specialty area, maybe an area that deals with a lot of computers and servers and things like that. But it forms a dense cloud and displaces the air around it. It's also really cold, um, and it can frost over something, whatever you use it on. The thing about it is it's kind of heavy. They're not as easily used as like an ABC extinguisher. The discharge range is not too far. Like with a normal ABC extinguisher, you have a pretty good range to be able to stay away from the fire when extinguishing. And that one you have to get a little bit closer up, and it doesn't perform well in temperatures below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And I don't perform well in those temperatures either. So it dilutes the oxygen in the air. So it cools and also removes the oxygen from the area, but it's not suitable for any type of pressurized fuel or cooking fires. This is a class A or B foam, and that's where they put the AFFF or um, the protein foams in there, and these can be certain ones, and it's again, it's according to how it's set up, can be used for polar solvents. If you have maybe a processing plant or something that deals with that a lot, they may have a few of these on hand. And your Class K, again, it's going to be a wet chem extinguisher, and it's only for Class K ratings. They are pretty expensive. They actually have a specialty nozzle on them to disperse the agent properly, and it's it's something that's really good, um, very effective on the deep fat fryer and in oil fire, cooking oil fire, to be exact. Excuse me. And thing about it as well, it's also kind of double fold. I don't think it really describes it in here, but things with the Department of Health, if an extinguisher is used in a kitchen area, then all the foodstuffs that restaurant has to be thrown away, because the dry chem powder is pretty toxic, and you wouldn't want to eat anything that it come in contact with. Whereas the Class K is different, that if it is used, only the food that has been left out has to be thrown away. So that's an advantage that we also let restaurant owners know what's good about having a Class K, because they kind of shudder a little bit whenever they have to look at getting it and then find out what the price is. And then halogenated extinguishing agents or clean agents, suited for electrical equipment. It's stored as liquids. Is discharged under high pressure. Um, the dry powder is going to extinguish fires involving the combustible metals. It has table salt and different additives and stuff on there. If you've ever had a magnesium engine block fire, or either of the magnesium pieces on steering wheels, you put water on that, it just sprays everywhere, and it can be more hazardous. But using this kind of helps to extinguish the fire much easier and safer. But you have to be careful. If the metal's molten, the force of the agent can cause it to spatter out. So some things to consider whenever we're going to assess what type of extinguisher is needed is the travel distance, the mounting, access, and the type of the extinguisher. Whenever we're inspecting these extinguishers for use, we want to look for damage in the bottles, on the valve necks, the hoses, um, and the handle. Yeah, I've seen a couple of them sometimes where they mount them improperly, like in the sheetrock, or they'll put like a 10-pound extinguisher on a mount with sheetrock anchors, and they'll pull right out. They'll fall down, and it could damage it, and they'll just kind of set it up by the wall near where it was mounted, and it may work, it may not, kind of situation. So be aware of those kind of things. Um, your documentation reporting of any issues, if it's requiring a new inspection tag, it could be out of date. It could have no pressure. And it's one of those things people don't know. If you use a fire extinguisher, you can't just use a little bit and put it back on the shelf. The particulates being so fine, it will actually get into the valve assemblies and will allow small little gaps to maintain in the valve, to where over time it will bleed down the propellant pressure. So once it's used once, no matter if it was just a little puff or the whole thing, it's done for. And you want to check and see if the hose is connected to the extinguisher. It threads into the valve assembly. Another thing is, especially in our area, that we want to be aware of, that whenever we're looking at fire extinguishers, especially your ABCs, and if they're mounted outside, you may have a dirt dauber that will build a little nest in there and it will block off that hose. That is some things um, that should be inspected during the annual inspection that whoever whatever business has contracted to take care of their extinguishers. But I emphasize the word should. There's a lot of times where we find that they just went around and changed tags and didn't look at anything on them. Items requiring the violation and reinspection. If it's not mounted, if it's not accessible, people may try to set it up on a shelf, pile stuff in front of it, and that's not going to work. Also, if they're supposed to have a fire extinguisher and it's missing, it's a really big issue. I think we went over it pretty good, just hitting the high points. Fire extinguishers are to extinguish the fire in the incipient fires. They're made there's different types of extinguishers for different types of fires. They have different types of extinguishing agents in them, and they're built for different purposes. Um, but you'll do a lot with fire extinguishers in part of your career. That's kind of having that small little thing to help fight a fire really quickly, to hopefully to keep it from spreading and doing a lot of damage. And all right, so that's going to be it. Any questions on fire extinguishers? All right, everybody still with me?
Yes, sir.
All right,
Still here.
All right, good deal. Just making sure that my computer hadn't dropped, or everybody went to sleep on me. All right, we're gonna hit this one real quick. It's pretty short as well, but no questions on extinguishers. All right, I guess not. So we'll go into um, all right, we're gonna go into safe housekeeping practices. I've talked about this a little bit in last night, and that's kind of one of the things that we're going to look at for these different buildings and different occupancies. All right, we're going to talk about why good housekeeping practices is important for fire prevention, and list the 3 requirements of good housekeeping. That's a new one for me, but all right, and we'll evaluate the common fire life safety hazards related to it, um, and a few examples are listed below, and some more continued. All right, and then we're going to describe the best method for reducing risk presented by unsafe housekeeping. All right, if things are filthy, and I don't know if y'all have any of these houses in your area, to where you go in and just stuff is just jam packed, stacked up to the ceiling, and you may be there for a medical call, and you're looking around thinking, oh my goodness, if we ever had a fire here. Um, we see that a lot, and it can also be in commercial buildings and commercial businesses, retail stores. In Poplarville, we had um, a retail business that had a lot of fire load. They didn't have a storeroom. It was just all their inventory was on the floor. They may have boxes and boxes of little trinkets and statues and so on and so forth. Um, just an enormous fire load, and they ended up having a fire in there, and the fire load in that building and the building next to it um, was so intense that we lost a city block, um, and it was pretty bad. I don't know. Some people that's been around for a little while may have heard about it, but that was years and years ago. But since then, we started a fire prevention program, and have taken care of those type of issues. But during the safe housekeeping, we're going to eliminate unwanted fuels. If you have tall grass and things around a building, that can easily catch fire and catch fire to the building. We're going to remove any of the, or we're going to check to for any obstructions or impediments to egress out of the building. Any of sources of ignition that we can improve, um, and keep it from igniting materials that are nearby. And we're also going to look for the safety for emergency personnel. We're going to keep our response in mind for that as well. We have to recognize these housekeeping problems and take action to eliminate them. A lot of time it takes educating the property owner. They may not see anything wrong with it, but we let them know about what can happen. Um, if they keep things neat and clean, they're going to have a reduced risk of fire, and may have lower work injury rates, I guess. The requirements of the good housekeeping is making sure that equipment is arranged and laid out in a proper manner to be able to work around it. That materials not stored in a way that would increase a hazard or maneuverability around inside, and how things, the operational neatness and cleanliness. There's different processing plants that in the or different processing operations that in the height of their processing whatever item that they make or they build, their workstations, their work areas can get pretty bad, full of discarded garbage and things of that nature. And if they don't have where somebody just comes around constantly cleaning up and picking up, they may have a period of time where they shut down and they clean their workstation and then start up again. But be aware of whatever practices that if you have a processing plant in your area. Any of the exterior issues, if an area is blocked, obstruction, or impaired in any of the access, it's showing snow, and that's not something typically that we deal with. But be mindful if there's something that's going to um, block an exit door from opening or to the means of escape away from a building. If it's going to impede that, then that's something that definitely would need to be addressed. Something that helps is premises identification, making sure that the address number is clearly listed in a means that can be read from the apparatus access route. And in Mississippi, it's actually a law where all buildings are supposed to be numbered and listed. So we already talked about snow accumulation. Um, Trees, bushes, landscaping, snow. Um, Early on in my career, my captain and I went out doing hydrant testing, and we were looking and looking and looking. We spent quite a while looking for a particular fire hydrant that was supposed to be in an area, and we located it inside of an azalea bush. Um, my captain said that that bush was overgrown, and we proceeded to cut a 3-foot lane around the fire hydrant. Our mayor wasn't happy about it because it was his friend's house and his friend's azalea bush, but you got to do what you got to do to be able to get to that type of equipment. So that's something to be mindful of there, and then also how the trees, bushes, and landscape affect the egress of the occupants out of the building, but also your ability to um, do a 360 around if there was a fire there, to be able to address any hazards from the exterior and make a secondary entry point or something like that um, if the building was ever on fire. And looking at that, signs may need to be added to direct people around. Now here's the protection of the flammable liquid or gas equipment. Um, is having different posts, guardrails, high curb, something to protect that gas valve. Another thing that you're starting to see more and more is like for different large retail stores where they're being required to have posts in front of the door to protect them from vehicles from accidentally hitting somebody or driving into the store. All right. Fire exposure threats, the accumulation of combustible materials, and pallets are they're amazing to catch fire. There's a lot of dry, they're typically going to be dry. There's plenty of air for circulation and for air to be able to fuel a fire. We in Poplarville there is a pallet plant, and the outside of the pallet plant, they if they have a pallet that's broken, busted, whatever, or it's not repairable, they stack it up outside. So you have a huge pile inside, huge pile outside. Um, and we actually had a fire there before, but it was on the outside. We were able to make a very quick response to it and put the fire out as it in a pretty small compared to what it could have been. But that's one of the things we had to work with and stay on them constantly was with their housekeeping. Right. Idle wood pallets should be at least 30 feet from buildings, but most of the time you're going to find them just like in that picture, stacked several high right upside the building. So be mindful of that, and it may not even be pallets. It may be something else that catches your attention that you have to um, get taken care of and get them to change up their policy and how they store those type items. The exposure threats: any combustible waste should not be stored near flammable combustible liquids. This is some things that to us, we read it and it looks like it's a lot of common sense, but there's some people that may be doing things like that that would violate something like that and think it's perfectly okay, or not even think of it as a threat like we would think of it as. So, again, this is a time not really to chastise, but to educate. Tall grass and weeds shouldn't be allowed around the LP gas tanks, hose or lines, um, around the building, in any other type of storage areas. If they do have a large pallet pile that's 30 foot away from the building, it should be maintained and kept clean around it, so that there's not that risk of tall grass or something to catch it on fire. Dumpsters should be at least 10 foot from the combustible buildings. And, this is we see dumpster fires all the time. A lot of times it's different companies that'll put combustible materials or ashes or something like that in there, and we end up have to call and dig through all the nastiness to put the fire out. One of the exterior issues there is the wildland urban interface, and that's where you're going to have vegetation on the outskirts part of town. Maybe it's in a town, as a small town. You may have where wooded areas is close to buildings or close to downtown area or green spaces and stuff like that, and that's where we want to make sure that we're aware of those areas, and we can have them to keep those areas clean, and to prevent any type of like a woods fire going in and burning a commercial area or something of that nature. Um, and you kind of getting into the wildland stuff, talking about defensible spaces where it's clear to combustibles and fuel ladders and things of that nature. But just be aware that cleanliness typically is going to prevent fire from spreading. And here's an example. Um, the way that the fire would go up the slope, and the environmental factors that play in, the also the environment, time of the year. I know during the springtime, it's kind of our grass fire, field fire, woods fire time, because everything's dry, still kind of a dry. Um, the humidity's down, so it's dry climate during that time frame, or drier, and everything catches fire really easily. Uh, for the interior, we look at the interior for things that can cause fire, oily oily rags and things like that for the spontaneous combustion. Um, and that's I've had a couple cases of spontaneous combustion or spontaneous ignition, as they have it listed as causes of fires. If it is like a mechanic shop that has oily rags and stuff like that, make sure that they're stored in a metal container with tight fitting covers, and that's typically to prevent um, them catching fire, or the fire to be able to spread. Dust and lint accumulation. This is something, especially if you have an operation like maybe a convalescent care facility, to where they wash the clothes and sheets and things of their clients. Also, hospital settings, making sure that they're keeping their areas clean around their washer and dryer units. Um, Combustible dust. You may see that in like different large, one thing that comes to mind is like a large feed co-op or something where they have bulk um, animal feeds and stuff like that, that as it moves around in its processes can have fine powder to deposit around. Um, but it needs to be removed if it starts to accumulate. And we know dust and lint needs to be cleaned up pretty frequently. And if there's any processes that have fibrous waste, it needs to be picked up and cleaned up. Any mechanical issues, if there's excess lubricant, a lot of times that'll attract some dirt and dust to the area. You can have friction, heat friction that can ignite the oils that's used to lubricate the machine, and we want to make sure that it's just not obviously overdone with the oils. I mean, it gets hot enough. Oil is very flammable, and that's one of the things I really like. This statement that it says is the property owner, they're responsible for cleaning up any type of accumulation, the outside and all that. That's um, they may think that's something that we should do. I have actually had citizens ask about us doing that because it would make their property more fire safe, and there's so many different issues with being able to do that. But it's not our job; it's their responsibility. But our responsibility as inspectors is to point that out, to recognize that that's an issue and get it corrected. Um, the storage is always an issue with different places. Um, they I've dealt with businesses in buildings where they want to stack up items to the ceiling, and in some areas they just don't have enough storage space, and they have to maintain a certain amount of bulk items to be stored, um, and that's the best that they can do, and they're mindful of in trying to be as safe as possible, but it's just kind of for their operation. That's kind of a necessity. So it's kind of one of those things where you balance out and you try to make variances and try to help them to be mindful that of the fire hazards that pose in from excess storage. You want to try to keep away any of the ignition sources, or as much of the ignition sources as possible. Um, High piled storage is over 12 foot in height, and some of the places they have narrow aisles of just kind of walking around, unstable piles. So these are things not only for the ignition hazard, but also the hazard for responding firefighters. So if you're going in there and you're doing a search, and it's all this different materials that's stacked up, if it falls down on a firefighter trying to do a search in there, that's going to be a bad day. Um, Being mindful of this is a really good example of like the paper products. If you're putting a lot of water out and they soak up water, um, you can cause their weight to increase exponentially, and they're going to end up, big fancy word for a whole bunch. And they may have it on a shelf, and I'm talking about bulk storage, like cases and cases. Imagine kind of like a Sam's or something like that, but where it's not on a shelf that's made for that, so it quickly overloads the capacity of the shelf, and can cause it to fall and collapse, and cause kind of the domino effect in storage areas and things like that. Trash and recycling issues. I know we used to have a house in the county where somebody kept newspapers for recycling, but at the time there wasn't really a really easily accessible um, recycling place, and so it just kind of stacked up, and we had a department that was going to their property several times for medical calls that every time going in there, concerned that if something ever would have happened there. These items can be combustible, and you may have kind of a hoarder situation where you have even garbage stacked up and mound inside living conditions. So, that's something to be mindful of in the residential side, but also in the commercial side, that items can just get stacked up. Somebody tells a worker, "Hey, just move it into wherever," they're going to do what they're told. Packing, shipping materials. Dunnage is loose packing material. They ignite pretty easily, have a high rate of heat release, and NFPA 1, it cites NFPA 1, but it has in the code set, it requires that combustible waste be removed daily from buildings. IFC has a very similar code that covers that. The flammable combustible liquids, and you'll have some amounts that are allowed depending on the type of occupancy, but it needs to be stored in the approved containers and cabinets, and they need to be to have hazardous materials plan on how to manage if there is a spill, leak, or something like that. And that's something that should be included in pre-plannings, that if we have a fire at those type businesses, that we're aware that they carry larger than normal amounts of these items. Spray booths require regular cleaning, and being mindful. There's different type of like floor cleaning. They use an example, and treatment can cause a fire hazard because of chemicals used and sealants and things of that nature. And that's you looking at this an example of a warehouse. They may place pallets in a way that it blocks access to a fire extinguisher, control valves for the water system, pull stations, fire doors, and all that. And this is on the bottom. IFC has it that if it's a building that has a sprinkler system, that any items cannot be stored within 18 inches of the ceiling. It's 24 for a building that does not have a sprinkler system. And then our kitchen cooking hoods. The hood and exhaust system, it's made for the grease fires. If the cooking area catches on fire, it removes the smoke and the heat and all that, and also has the extinguishing agent that can open and to put the fire out. They're supposed to be free, and remember, supposed to be frequently inspected and cleaned. But if we inspect a kitchen area, we need to make sure that those hoods are being professionally cleaned and inspected. Compressed gas cylinders. We start to see these a lot in like restaurants where they use large amounts of carbon dioxide for their Coke, or for their soft drink machines and things like that. You may see these in several other different types of settings. Main thing is we want to make sure that they're secured from not being knocked over. If they're an oxidizer or a fuel, we want to be aware of that, and we want to make sure that they're used in a safe manner. Control of smoking. You have smoking around areas that have flammable liquids, gas, combustible, stuff like that is not a good idea. You may have a business that has a lot of combustible materials around it, where there is a designated smoking area, and that's it. And that policy and procedure should be enforced by the company. But while you're doing your inspection, if you see something, that's definitely something to notate. If you see somebody that's smoking out of an approved area, then that needs to be addressed. In those areas, you may have some type of smoking butt or cigarette butt receptacle. They have the Fire Marshal brand, or several other ones that are out there. You see a lot of those that are common. It has like the really tall neck and it goes into a sand bottom. But you want to make sure that these are used in that way that if there is a fire that it's contained and prevents the ignition from a cigarette butt. We want to make sure that we address these issues and that we go to have these issues corrected. We may have to address operational issues with a business owner because they may be looking at getting the job done, getting the item made, built, and all that, and they're not thinking of the safety aspect of it. So we need to bring that to their attention. A few strategies is for correcting the issues is find ways to reduce or eliminate the sources of ignition, control the fire load, provide the access to the building or the site, and that could be emergency access or being able to control storage items to make the interior a little bit safer, and also providing the access to the protection systems and equipment that they're required to have, and to maintaining the adequate means of egress. All right, so kind of through the summary, we're one of our jobs is to check and make sure that our businesses are operating safely and that they're not storing things in manners that would increase the amount of danger in an area. We also want to make sure that the areas outside of buildings, not only just inside of buildings, are areas of concern and responsibility that we look at and make sure that those are taken care of so that we're trying to prevent fires at those locations. All right, still going strong? Any questions on the housekeeping?
We're still good. We lost a few guys. They just got dispatched to an extrication, so they'll be back with us soon.
Okay. Well, we'll have everything. They can follow up. Everything's going to be posted on YouTube and through the site, through different links to the site. So if they miss it, they'll be able to catch up. It's actually what I'm doing a little bit now. And again, read the chapters. This is where the chapters are where the tests are going to come from. Read the chapters. I can't say that enough. I'm giving my insight and experience on it, but I don't know the test questions, and I can't list them all out for you. And this is something that everybody needs to be aware of and to read in the chapters. All right, if everybody's ready, we'll ride right into occupancy, safety, and evacuation plans. This is really important in that this is where the kind of the meat and potatoes of the fire inspection is, that we're here for the safety of the occupancy first. All right, it's life and save lives, protect property, right? So this is what we're doing here, is to save lives. We're going to discuss the importance of calculating the occupancy load and determine the egress requirements of the building. Describe how to ensure that the means of egress meet all applicable codes and standards. And describe how to ensure that emergency access for existing site meets all applicable codes and standards. How to evaluate emergency evacuation drills to ensure that they, again, meet codes and standards, and describe how to evaluate evacuation drills in various occupancies. All right, this is a big skill thing. This is something that we will be working on. And Chief Stein, a couple of the guys had a question. As part of our plan next Wednesday, we're planning a field trip to Poplarville. We have been given permission to do a fire inspection at one of the buildings, a dorm that's under construction, and then another building. We're planning on having class that night in Poplarville, and then we'll cover some skills as well. And this will be one of the things that we kind of work on. It's really really important that everybody gets this, and this may be something that we may have to spend a little bit more time on to make sure that everybody's got the
What time do we have to be in Poplarville?
Is 6 o'clock good for everybody, or is it kind of we need to
Okay,
change
so
it?
it's not going to be during the daytime. It's going to be a nighttime field trip, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll update the chief on those hours.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean we can. I can move it to 5 if need be. If it kind of works for everybody a little bit better to get started and get done a little bit earlier. But just let me know on that. But all right, we're gonna learn how to compute the occupancy load for a single use and multi-use building. And we're gonna check. We'll double check our figures, and we'll factor in our different variables for the maximum allowable occupancy load. All right, the two most commonly used buildings in the fire code models is going to be your NFPA and ICC. States and communities can adopt model codes and create ones of their own. And there's the NFPA 101 is the life safety code from NFPA. But getting into the occupancy load. All right, this is something that not only we're going to have to really read on, we're really going to have to harp on. I'm going to kind of slow my roll down a little bit to really make sure that we're hitting on all this. But we want to make sure that we're covering this and everybody understands. This is some algebra that we have to learn. There's a little equation that I'm going to share with everybody on how to not only figure the occupancy load, but also to double check it and all that. All right. The occupant load is the number of people who might occupy in an area. All right. That's the maximum amount of number of people that can occupy a space. All right. Now, kind of a forethought on this. You may have a space big enough to have, say, 300 people. But if you only have one exit or two exits, you may or may not be able to have that many people in that space because of limited exits. Now, if it's one, you can't have any more than 49 people in that building, no matter how big it is. If you only have one exit, one means of egress. There's a table in the IFC and NFPA that goes with that, and it goes by. I think if it's two exit doors, then you can have up to 500 people if the size of the door allows for it and all that. But this is how we're going to calculate that space, and then we'll get into kind of checking later on in the chapter. All right. It's going to have for the two different calculations, one for table and chairs and one for open area. You're going to have to research your code sets to see what you're going to have to use to calculate that occupancy. All right, an open area like let's say a gym used for various type of activities. It's going to be an open end like a high school gymnasium. All right, but it's going to be different if it has fixed seatings like maybe a cafeteria. And this is kind of what like the picture at the bottom is going to show. as you have tables and chairs and all that. Now that's not fixed. That's, that can be moved around. That space can be opened up and it can be occupied by furniture. You may also have something like an auditorium where there's fixed seatings, and it's based off of different factors as to how many seats can be in there. But then think of that same kind of setup and then think of a church house. Then you're basing it on how many inches, and typically it's 18 inches per person. So you have to measure out the pew and see how many times can 18 go into whatever measurement that I obtain, and that's going to be how many people is going to be able to sit at this pew. And you calculate for each pew that's in the sanctuary area, and that's going to give you your occupancy as far as in that. But you really, I mean, it kind of can branch out and go a lot of different ways. But this is kind of the basis here, and you really have to be familiar with it before being able to move on and calculate for your more complicated areas. All right, your occupancy load factors, they're listed in table 7.3.1.2 in the life safety code. In the IFC, it's listed in chapter 10. You have your gross factors and your net factors. All right, your gross factor is going to be calculated for the building as a whole, and that's going to be your measurements from wall to wall. All right, your net factors is going to be only the spaces that can be occupied. All right, so say you're actually going to subtract space that's occupied by unusable space, tables, columns, chairs, bars. You may have like a event hall, and they have bar space there for you. You have to take that out if it calls for the net. So that's one of the things too that kind of you get your space and you start deducting what can be occupied by a person. All right, now this is your occupancy load factors for an assembly use. All right, so everybody in a concentrated use without fixed seating, you have 7 net, and that's square feet per person. And then it also has the square meter for per person if you're one of those people who use the metric system. Then you have in here, it goes into without fixed seating, it's 15 net. All right. So it's 15 people per square foot. And that's kind of, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but you just kind of follow with me here. All right, your bench type seating, one person, 18-inch, like we're saying, so on and so forth. You'll be able to look at all this. I do want to bring your attention, look at about middle ways. It talks about kitchens, and it says 100. And what that's meaning is the higher the number, the less amount of people that can fit in that space. That's your higher risk areas, your kitchens, the library, stack areas. You have your catwalks, galleries, and gardens also listed, and that's kind of your higher risk. And as far as for fire risk, storage of flammable materials, so on and so forth. So that's gonna vary. Here's another one. This is going to be for educational use, healthcare, detention, so on and so forth. They're in your books. Definitely take time and look over them. These are different factors that you're going to be using while computing occupancy. All right, so here's the calculation of the occupant load for a single use occupancy. All right, you find that on the occupant load factor on the table 7.3, blah, blah, blah. Divide the occupant load factor into the area that you're calculating. Okay, so say as it's listed there, you have 30 occupancy load factor. All right, so let's pull it up in my book here. So it's going to be equivalent of swimming pool deck. All right, is where we looked on that list. We found that it told us 30 occupancy load factor. So you're going to divide the occupancy load factor into the area in square feet. All right, so you're going to have to calculate the area by square foot, find that out, and then divide in your factor. Then you're going to calculate. Did I overskip something? I think I did. All right. Let me explain that first before we kind of get into this. All right, so you have 900 square feet, which is not big. It's kind of the size of it might be like a shed or farm or a portable building, something real small. It's saying that 30, if you divide 30 into 900, 30 goes into 900 30 times. And so it'd be 30 occupants. That's how many people that you can have inside that space. All right, for the occupancy load, now this is to calculate for a multiple occupancy. Find the occupant load factor for each room. Divide the factor into the area. And then add together the occupant load for each room. All right, so here's where it kind of gets a little tricky. And you're pretty much kind of taking it bite by bite. You're kind of splitting it up. You may have different factors, load factors that you're going to use for that particular room or that particular area. So it's going to be by each area or room and what it's used for, and not necessarily the building as a whole. And as we do this and we calculate each individual area, and then we add that up for the building as a whole, to figure out the load. Just kind of wrap your head around that for a little bit. There's some other things that we're going to kind of throw in here that's going to kind of throw for a loop. This is going to be something that we're going to chew on for a little while. All right. The Life Safety Code allows for designated occupant load to increase as long as the other parts of the means of egress are sufficient. But you never load the capacity of any area beyond 7 per square foot per person. The means of egress must accommodate all people occupying the area served. All right. So here's what we're thinking about, and think about something like a mall. All right. Well, that's what I want you to think about as far as like a multi-use building, like the last thing that we talked about. You figure the occupancy load for Bath and Body Works. You figure the occupancy load for J.C. Penney's. You figure the occupancy load for Victoria's Secret. You figure the occupancy load for every store along in there. and for the building as a whole, then you go back and you check to make sure that the hallways, doors, stairways, and all that is wide enough, and it's all listed in the code to be able to support um, that amount of people, that capacity. And it has to provide the egress capacity for minimum of the calculated occupancy load. Now, we know that multiple exits are going to be required in this. Again, think of a mall. This is probably the easiest way to kind of explain a multi-use building. And think about, you have multiple doors. I mean, the doors into a mall in some areas can be, you may have 5 sets of double doors right next to each other, there to be able to get some people out in the event of a fire. All right, the means of egress is a continuous path of travel from any point of the building to a public way safely from the building. All right, that's really really important there to keep in mind. Your means of egress is not just out of the building, but to a public way safely away from the building. That's where we're talking about housekeeping. If you may have a building, if the trees and the bushes are overtaking your sidewalks and all that, just being to an outside sidewalk may not be safely away from the building. So it's to be able to get people away, a good ways away, into a safe area from the building. All right. Your means of egress is going to consist of your exit access, your exit, and your exit discharge. All right. Well, I think I maybe skipped over. Oh, okay, we're good. All right, your exit access, anything that takes you to an exit. All right, that's going to be the pathway that you're going to take. It could be this little space in here between the tables, in between tables and chairs, the table and the wall. That's going to be your exit access. The length establishes your travel distance. Your width is regulated by Life Safety Code and also the International Fire Code. You want free, unobstructed ways to exits. All right, and that also kind of plays into your exit signage and things of that nature. All right, your exit is the door leading directly outside at ground level. Okay, so you start talking about multiple levels and things like that. But remember, your exit is the door leading directly to the outside at ground level. I do have to say that any inspector test that is worth its salt is going to ask that question: what is an exit? And it is going to be the door leading directly to the outside at ground level. The door leading through protective passageway to outside at ground level. Exit must be remote from each other. All right, so if one exit is compromised, and you see in this little picture over here, there's fire over here, this exit's blocked off. Now you have to go through another exit. So, you don't have just one large bank of exits, and that's it. They're scattered all throughout with a minimal travel distance. All right, your exit discharge directly to the outside or through a fire-rated passageway to the outside. 50% of exit stairs may discharge onto the street floor of a building. All right, free and obstructed route. The exit discharge is a free and obstructed route to a public way. All right. You got to think in stairs being a factor in too as part of your means of egress. All right. How you're going to evaluate the means of egress, the life safety code requirements, the number of exits, egress door capacity of a door, and this is kind of what you're going to kind of your algebra. You're going to have to kind of dust off a little bit of math skills here or there. In a chart, and it is There is a chart. I'm trying to look for it real quick. But it's your I know in the IFC it's called your inches of door width by occupant served. And so you look over here, what we're going to do is we're going to divide our our amount of occupancies into the amount of inches door width, and there's a factor that's going to be added into it. This is all just up here, the means of egress factor. All right, so they do this a little bit different way than I do, and this is kind of throwing me off a little bit right here. But what you're basically is what you're going to have to do is once you find the occupancy load for that building, you check it, you evaluate that the amount of people that you can have in that building space by how much or how you're able to get them out. All right. So to be able to accommodate a certain number of people, given a certain occupancy and all that, you have to have so many inches of door width space to be able to get them out. And this is a way that you can factor into that, and it'll tell you that, okay, you can factor that in and see, yeah, this amount of door width space will accommodate 500 people, and you check that against, well, if your phone rang and it threw me off. Sorry, I have these moments from time to time. All right, so say you have an occupancy load of 540 people, but whenever you calculate this and you evaluate your exit, and by the size of the door, you can only evacuate 500 people out. Well, even though you have the space for 540, your exits doesn't support that, so you have to bring it down to meet that level. And then also on the bottom here is talking about the stairway requirements. And that's how you factor in using stairs as your means of egress. And you can see the factor changes a little bit because if you're using stairs, you're going from one level to another, and that's higher risk. So it throws in kind of a redundant safety factor into that. All right. Also, how you're going to calculate it and evaluate, or not calculate, how you're going to evaluate is your exit serving more than one story. All right. So you look over here that the occupant load of each story is considered. The capacity must be maintained in the direction of egress, and the stair width is determined by the required egress capacity of each floor. All right. So with all that being said, you look over here, you look at the floor, how many occupants, the amount of occupancy, but you're still taking into factor of you still have to get the people up here on the 5th floor out, just like you do the people on the 2nd floor. And there's different factors that play into that means of egress. Stairwells are protected in a way, and they're built in a way that's supposed to provide protection from fire and smoke to be able to facilitate all those people getting out. But you keep that in mind is your occupancy load and how it's going to be factored in, that your stairwells are going to, or stairways will support exiting that many people. All right, egress capacity from a point of convergence, and that's where you have a story above and a story below meeting together. and it cannot be less than the combined capacity. Now, a convergence does not occur when a multiple floors enter a stairwell going in the same direction. Now, this is talking about, like, say you have a say if you're going to like a big, I'm trying to think of a building that off the top of my head would be an example, but you have two stairs that are or stairwells that are all kind of meeting together. You may see it like at maybe like the Smoothie King Center or the Superdome, where you have these different ramps and stairwells that are all kind of meeting at the same place, and then everybody goes on down. That's where you would get a convergence from. All right, you have a maximum of 4.5-inch projections each side of an egress component. And that's going to be any type of projection. Could be handrail, could be an encased column or something in the structural structure. So just things to be aware of there. The corridor capacity is determined by dividing the occupancy load by a required number of exits. All right, and there is a minimum corridor distance. I know the IFC has that. But there's another factor. There's a lot of different factors and different components into figuring out means of egress. This is kind of your biggest headache area of the fire inspection world is figuring out, and especially for the multiple use and your multiple stories, it can be an all day thing to determine what an occupancy is for those type buildings. Minimum width of means of egress cannot be less than what's required for a given component, and those are listed in your different code sets, whether it's NFPA or IFC. But they will have the minimum requirement. It's around 5 feet for some of your bigger occupancies and or occupancy loads. All right, your number of means of egress, generally there's going to be at least two. So if the occupancy load is from 500 to 1,000, you can't have any less than 3. If it's more than 1,000, you have to have more or no less than 4. In a multi-story building, the procedure is based on the floor-by-floor considerations. All right, so there's a lot of different factors that play in. There's a chart on page 127 in your book that at the very top right hand or left hand corner that has this chart for the maximum occupancy load. You have to have at least 2 for anything up to 500, and you have to have at least 1 means of egress for people or more than 49 people. Now, and what I'm meaning by that is we'll discuss this a little bit further, but what a mean of egress is an outward opening door that meets all the requirements to be a exit door, and that flows in the continuity of your means of egress. So, all right, we're talking about the exits must be separated by a distance equal to 1/2 the diagonal space or diagonal of space being served. And this is basically kind of your room area where you can't have 2 exits right close to each other. And what that ensures is that if there is a fire and it blocks off one exit, that another exit is still accessible. It is a redundant safety factor. It's put in there so you have a second way out. That's what we teach kids, and we teach people with fire prevention and fire safety home exit drills, is to know 2 ways out and all that. This is kind of the same principle there. And it's going to be based off 1/3 if the building has an automatic sprinkler system. So I mean that's different variables there. just kind of a heads up, if you start getting into the codes and you start really digging in, I mean, it's you're really in some areas, and especially means of egress, you can really fall down the rabbit hole on that and just research it. And you'll find exceptions here that'll send you there, and you'll have to research this and go back to that. And, so it's something that with time, with practice, with experience, you'll get. I know it people may be having their brains starting to sizzle about at this point, but just bear with it. It's going to make sense. All right, your travel distance to exits. You have your maximum distance that occupants are permitted. Um, so that's if you have an exit that's either more easily accessible to you down the hall rather than just kind of getting crammed in with everybody else trying to use the same set of exits. Um, and then also, again, if there's a fire or there's some other type of situation that prevents you from using that particular exit or set of exits, then you have a backup or a secondary exit point nearby. And it's based on the types and number of obstructions. And if they have a sprinkler system, that typically you have a little bit more leeway, and you'll see that you gain either a little bit of distance or a little bit more people or a little bit in your factors if you have a sprinkler system in place. All right, you're also going to evaluate the common path of travel, and that's the distance an occupant must walk until deciding which means of egress to use. All right, and this is going to be, say, in an office space where somebody is there every day. They go the same way to this place, that place, and the other. They know their area and they maneuver around it every day. But we need to evaluate that, and what we're looking at is what path they're going to take and how it's influenced by the contents in the building, how things are arranged. It could be, um, you know, a building feature. It could be machinery or things put in place. The maximum permitted path of travel is the length that must not exceed to reach the nearest exit. All right. So, um, again, you have your maximum travel distances that you have to be maintained. Um, so if a person's having to go from one door and then through another door and this, that, and the other, it's not as the crow flies. To put it in a better perspective, it's going to be as a person maneuvers around different obstacles in their path. And then your egress capacity is the number of people allowed through a means of egress. And to calculate this, you're going to calculate or compute the egress capacity. You're going to calculate the floor area, determine the occupancy load factor, divide floor area by occupant load factor, measure clear width of each egress component, and determine the capacity factor for each exit component. All right, that's very complicated to say. Just what we just went over is how we're going to figure out how many people are there. We're going to have our safety factors in there, making sure that it's going to be wide enough, and that's going to be your hallways, your doorways, and all that. And determine your capacity factor for each component. Is, like I said, being your doorways, your hallways, your stairwells, your all that. We're also going to divide the clear width of each exit component by a capacity factor, and that's going to be what I was talking about, what's listed in the book. Determine the most restrictive component, and we're going to keep that in mind as we're having that common travel path. We're going to keep that in mind, the most restrictive component in there, and kind of see can I still move this amount of people in that amount of space. The we're going to determine that total egress capacity for a floor and ensure that the total egress capacity equals and exceeds the occupancy load. And what that's saying is that we're going to make sure that we can either meet the amount of people we're going to be able to safely evacuate that many people out of the building, or we're going to exceed it so that even more people could exit out, and that brings in a better safety factor into our occupancy load. All right, and then our maximum egress capacity is going to be the maximum number of people allowed through a specific egress point. So that specific set of doors that is going to be what we're going to our egress maximum egress capacity is what we're going to figure in that. All right, the elements and arrangements. All right, our doors are marked, like I said, what allows it to be a means of egress is the door and how the door is arranged and set up. When a door is marked as an exit, it has to meet the requirements of the life safety code, IFC code, so your standardized code sets. It should be side hinged or pivoted. You have different types of doors that are out there that can be used as exit doors, but they have to follow in those requirements. They're normally kept closed to limit the spread of smoke. That's one of the things that you see. A good example is like in a hospital where you're walking down a hallway and there's a set of doors. Well, those doors are typically connected to a magnetic system that keeps those doors open. And in the event of a fire, you have the fire alarm that's pulled. It releases the magnetism on that element and allows the doors to close. That's going to block smoke and fire and kind of to try to isolate the fire in a certain area and prevent its spread. And it also is going to allow for easier egress or evacuation of the occupants inside. All right, they should not be blocked open with hooks or wedges because we need them to function properly. All right, if a door is locked from the outside, the person inside should be able to unlock it by simply opening the handle. And that's going to be kind of like your panic hardware or like your panic door, or like what it describes as a handle that you can easily push down and open and push out. And here we go, panic hardware, just like what I was talking about. It's a door latching assembly, and that way, even if the door is locked, and what I like about it can be opened from the inside. They call it a panic hardware because you don't have to do anything but push against that little bar, and it opens up the door and allows it to be swung out so that the people can escape. Oh, something I done got ahead of myself. My apologies. All right. It's called a fire exit hardware when it is tested and listed. All right, so like UL, Underwriters Laboratory, what we had talked about in one of the previous chapters is when it is tested and listed for fire protection rated doors, it can be a fire exit hardware or fire exit door. Remember, I don't think that it really goes into it a lot in this chapter, but we talked about the importance of all the different assemblies of a fire egress path or a means of egress, to include the hallways and the stairways and the doorways and all that, but also think that the door in its assembly is a rated assembly. The handle hardware, the hinge, the door in and of itself, the encasement of the door is all a rated assembly, and they should be stamped and have a tag on it that shows that it is a part of a rated assembly. All right, so we have a horizontal exit, and that's the means of egress from one area to an area of refuge into another area, typically through 2-hour fire barriers, and that's going to be, again, based on the the hardware, the assembly, the door assembly in and of itself, and then could be as far as the sheetrock in the hallway could be built to have that level of resistance, fire resistance factors, and all that. Um, it cannot comprise more than 50% of the total required exit capacity. All right, stairs. Stairwells are very important in getting people out of the buildings that have multiple stories. And you see kind of your outside exit stairs. You may have seen those on site, like some higher tenement buildings and things like that. If you've been to any of the bigger cities and kind of the older town areas, your interior stairwells, um, they help move people up and down, but they're built in a way to be able to facilitate those people out if there is a fire emergency. Um, they're going to minimize the danger of falling, I guess. I don't know why they'd have that listed, but there it is. The stair treads must be deep enough, and landing should break up a long flight of stairs. And that's part of code set as well, that you can where landings are required, and continuous railings are required. And that's I guess that's what it's talking about on the exit stairs in particular. Minimize the danger of falling. So if you have somebody fall down, especially if you're trying to get a lot of people out, they're going to hold up everybody. They're going to hinder the egress out of the building, and of course cause physical injury to people. All right, you have smoke-proof enclosures. It's stair enclosures designed to limit the spread of products of combustion, and that's kind of your exit stairwells where they have a fire-rated or smoke-rated door on there. You notice that they're pretty drab. There's not really much in those kind of stairwells, and that's there because that's there for a purpose. That's so that they don't have combustible materials. That's supposed to be kind of like an area of refuge, and it may be called that later on in the chapter, but it's built and designed in a way to protect people from the effects of fire while they're egressing out. And it's only accessed through the balconies open to the outside air, vented vestibules, mechanically pressurized vestibules. So your any which way, that's something to consider on your um, buildings that have stairwells like that. One of the common things is people look at it and they see that bottom floor as wasted space. So then they want to store stuff underneath it, and that is against fire code to store things through underneath stairwells that are used as means of egress. So being aware of that, and um, you can talk to people, and when you get asked that question, you can explain to them why, and they typically understand. All right, your ramps sometimes used instead of stairwells for large crowds, and that's some things that you see for like large uh, event centers and things like that. And it's made so that it can accommodate not only the handicapable but large mass groups, and it does prevent people from falling down and hindering egress. And they're used for access to the building and egress, but they have a very gradual slope, and the slope is actually determined by code as well. All right, exit passageways could be in a hallway, corridor, tunnel, or underfloor or overhead passageways. Um, They're separated and arranged according to the exit requirements and should not be used for conflicting purposes. All right, fire escape stairs. They're only permitted in existing buildings, and if you have an older building that is being refurbished or rebuilt, that's where you'll see the escape stairs. I've seen it in a few different places, like some old school buildings and stuff like that, where they were they had put escape stairs in place. And it has in here your best location for exteriors, masonry walls, escalators, moving walkways, and elevators. Escalators are not an acceptable means of egress. Moving walkways may be used if they conform to the requirements for ramps and or passageways, and elevators are not recognized as exits. The the only time, I have a little war story real quick, where elevators can be used as a means of egress. There's a school in an area that I worked that it's an old school. The building's been there for forever and 3 days. So they were renovating it. They added on areas to the side of the schoolhouse, the school building, that had a large auditorium in it. They would hold different events with a large amount of people. Um, and they used um, the elevator as a means for handy capable people to get up to the into the auditorium. Well, when they went back and they had the fire alarm systems installed, well, a fire alarm would typically cause a elevator to go down to the bottom floor and to pretty much be locked to the bottom floor for firefighters to use to get to the fire floor. Well, if there was a fire and there was a handy capable person in whatever means or condition, they would pretty much be stuck up there if the elevator went down to the first floor. And there was only there wasn't any really floors. It was just a means to be used to bring it up to the level to be able to go into the auditorium area. So that was one of the things where um, I had the elevator listed as a means of egress for handy capable people to evacuate those out of the area in the event of a fire. In that way, the fire alarm company did not wire it in to return back to the first floor and be locked in. So, just kind of be considerate of um, what you're dealing with, the totality of the circumstances. If you're a fire code official, at some point you're going to have that ability to say, yeah, I know what the code says, but it doesn't really work here, and this is what's best for the people and for the safety of the individuals here. Anyway, all right. So your area of refuge is protected area designed for use by people with mobility impairments. All right, kind of what I was talking about before. Provide safety before evacuation. The area of refuge that your stairwell is built to that standard as well. It should be to protect the occupants um, while they're obtaining egress from the building. All right, ropes and ladders. It's not recognized as a substitute for standard exits and may find use in 1 and 2 family dwellings. Um, I've had places that have asked about that because they've had buildings that were a little bit higher. Um, they were single story, but they were higher up. As the way they were built, it was just an old building, and they wanted to use ladders as a means of egress. Um, the fire official in that area allowed it, but it's kind of one of those things that you disinclude certain people, those with disabilities, and um, you know, given the situation, it's something that you need to again look at the totality of things, and it may be better for them to do a major major renovation to include exit stairs instead of trying to get away with just like a ladder system. Windows are not exits. The only time that you're going to find that is in school buses. They can be used as access to fire escapes in existing buildings if they meet certain criteria, right? But there's a lot of criteria to be met. All right, exit lighting. You have to see where to go and to evacuate the building quickly. No less than one candlelight measured at the floor. There has been some changes to the code where, and before it was very specific on the type of means of illumination, whereas now it's, it doesn't matter if you have something that consistently gives no less than one candlelight measured at the floor, you can use it. Emergency lighting is required in most occupancy. It's going to be those, if you notice in the hallway of a commercial property, you'll see the boxes with the lights onto the side, and they are made to be used if the power goes out. They'll provide battery backup lighting, and there's some pretty hefty batteries that are in the little box that the lights are connected to, and that's going to support those lights in a no power situation to be able to allow people to exit the building and see where they're going. It does not take place of regular building lighting. And that's one of those things too that kind of brings up a point to me. I've seen in dorm rooms or dorm buildings, rather, where they have actually bought a like a light set system where it was the kind of like the tubular bulb light sets, but it had a battery backup built into it. So you would have the normal regular building lighting even when the power's out because it was running off of battery power. Your exit signs, you want to make sure that they identify all the required exits and access way not immediately visible. The directional signs require when a direction of travel is not clear, right, and should be readily available. And you pretty much have to have signage throughout the entire egress path. And like I said, if you have to make a turn to get to an exit, then there needs to be an accompanying arrow or directional designation. Your maintenance of your means of egress. Many building owners or managers don't assign anybody to be responsible for the means of egress. And stairways may be used as storage. The exit doors may be blocked from the outside, blocked from the inside. I've seen where places wanted to store combustibles right next to the egress door. They may have loose handrails. Stair treads may be slippery. So this is why we do inspections. We're going to check these things. We're going to make sure means of egress is just as important in the fire and life safety world as smoke detectors, as portable fire extinguishers, as hood systems and all that. These are all systems that need to be in place because they do serve a purpose. And we need, that's part of our inspection, that we look at those things and we address those things and make sure that everything's in place and there to operate properly. All right, our evacuation emergency plans. They allow for safe and orderly removal of people from a building in case of a fire or other emergency. All right, the emergency plan deals with various types of emergencies that might affect the building. Be aware that in our world today, 20 years ago, whenever I started getting into the fire service, it was much different. Now we're considering lockdown in certain areas, and there's an emergency plans have grown, and I would say as the years go by, they continue to grow for all the new crazy things that we have to deal with and prepare for. My biggest thing that I tell officials with whatever type of occupancy group that I deal with is that emergency plans are great and you have to have them, but they need to also be fluid and keeping that in mind. All right, the components of an emergency plan um, is your plan is you can include the 2 ways out: location of fire extinguishers, fire alarm pull stations, and a meeting place. Um, I'm sorry, it should meet the needs of the business. So it should be big enough, large enough, have as many factors or as many pieces to it as it needs to include the business, and it needs to be taught to employees, and that's something that they should keep a record of. Is if they do annual safety training, or if there's safety orientation for new employees, um, things of that nature. Here's an example of an overlooking emergency plan, and it shows the different dining points. It kind of looks like a mall, um, but different storeway points and room points, and it has the locations of your exit doors, your fire extinguishers, and things of that nature. Also has a list, if you notice on the bottom, the location of the FDCs. All right, how that it's going to be um, the alerting area part of it is how they should be taught to report signs of fire, and they need to know the location of the pull stations and how to use them. Um, this is something I've ran into. There was a school that I was working with that completely retrofitted the entire campus with fire alarm systems, and that was great. That was amazing. Well, they were worried about the students tampering with the pull stations, so then they put a tamper box over the pull station. Well, this tamper box, if you pull it, it will sound an alarm. And it's not like your normal fire alarm, it's just kind of like a loud, annoying buzzing, but it's there. Well, the problem is there was an incident. They go and they pull the protection box, and it makes a loud buzzing noise, but it does not set off the alarm. So they need to be you need to be educated on what their system is and how it works and how to activate that system. So all they did was mess with the tampering box. They didn't activate the system, and luckily it was a false alarm and everything was okay. But that's where education comes in, and we need to make sure that these places are functioning and doing these things properly. All right. The get out and stay out, the evacuate immediately order. Floor sweepers should make sure everybody is exited, and that could be a manager or somebody that's a supervisor that's um, responsible for other people. And then people need to know not to re-enter until they're given an all clear. A meeting place is predetermined. It's an area. It could be a section of a parking lot, maybe a grassy area, or something to where everyone knows that they're going to meet up at. It's away from the building and arriving emergency equipment. And also, that's a good staging place to get an accountability together. And then at that point, if they can determine that there's somebody missing, then that's good information for the fire crews on scene to be able to concentrate efforts if they need to go and perform a rescue or a search. Right, evacuation leaders can be part of the plan, and that's your areas where they have visitors um, or employees that may need direction, um, and they ensure that the people are moved to a safe area and they account for everybody that they're responsible for. and they sweep the area if possible, where they go back in and they check and make sure that their area of responsibility is clear, and they make sure that the last person out closes the door. Um, and that's one of the things that kind of is missing out of a lot of emergency plans that they don't think of. But just that simple act to make sure that doors closed can definitely help in the fire suppression efforts. You have to have fire drills. It don't work without practice. Um, Everyone needs to be aware of emergency plans, and have announced drills and then unannounced drills, and they need to take time to train new employees. And this is also the same thing with schools. Um, that's where I've got a lot of my experience from with this. And one of the other things about an emergency plan um, is maintaining that it's fluid. And there may be the incident may be going on in an area that if they have a just a very solid, this is where we're going to go. Well, what happens if there's an incident that prevents from using this? What are you going to do? Everybody's going to be standing around not knowing what's going on and where to go, and it's going to be a big mess. So I've encouraged the officials that I speak with or have helped with their evacuation emergency plans that they keep a fluid mindset on this. But in the evacuation drills, we're going to look for overcrowding points. If you have the opportunity and to assess a fire drill, do it. You learn a lot. You learn of things that work, things that don't work, and you can help to kind of be that advice to help improve a drill that may save somebody's life one day. You may address some issues that like overcrowding in one exit whenever there's another one that's completely open. Um, Another thing you may determine is one of the drills that I saw that I had helped or I had helped the organization with redrawing their drill is they had their drill consisted of them walking out of one building and walking through another building to access their refuge area or their safe area. Well, what if the incident was in that building? What are they going to do? That was also one of the things they always planned to go to the back of the facility. Well, what if the emergency's at the back and there's ample space in the front? So again, fluidity of plans. It helps if because we never can plan for a very specific issue in a specific area. We can check for occupants not evacuating. The use of designed areas once or designated areas once outside. Check for any doors that are left open, and then if we evaluate these fire drills, we need to discuss it in not in a good constructive way, so that the information is taken and used to develop the drill better. All right, summary. NFPA and or ICC has all these different model codes. In it, there's different standards and charts, factors to use, and we need to be familiar with these and how to use them. All right, we need to be aware of the occupancy loads and how to calculate occupancy loads. It's not hard. It's just it kind of plays on your mind more than anything. But we will have practice on at this. Um, that's pretty much what I said in this next paragraph. That's something. All right, the means of egress affects the occupancy load, and so we want to make sure that it's sized to accommodate that occupancy load. We want to be familiar with the egress components, and that they are prepared to evacuate people out of a building if they're the threat of fire. We want to make sure that the continuity and the integrity of the means of egress is maintained. and we want to make sure that everything's ready to go, and that's part of our inspection and where we're going to evaluate the means of egress and our occupants and its ability to evacuate the occupant load of the building. And then also the evacuation plans, make sure that those are in place and being able to work with people of different organizations to be able to hone their evacuation plan. All right. My goodness. Everybody's as tired as I am?
Slightly.
All right. I'm
Station. Right.
What's up?
Yeah, Eric knows what I'm talking about. He got the text messages.
Oh,